Today's reading comes from Matthew chapter 18, verses 21 to 35. Then Peter came to Jesus and asked, "Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times?" Jesus answered, "I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times. Therefore the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. As he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 bags of gold was brought to him. Since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all that he had be sold to repay the debt. At this the servant fell on his knees before him. "Be patient with me," he begged, "and I will pay back everything." The servant's master took pity on him, cancelled the debt and let him go. But when that servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 silver coins. He grabbed him and began to choke him. "Pay back what you owe me," he demanded. His fellow servant fell to his knees and begged him, "Be patient with me and I will pay it back." But he refused. Instead, he went off and had the man thrown into prison until he could pay the debt. When the other servants saw what had happened, they were outraged and went and told their master everything that had happened. Then the master called the servant in. "You wicked servant," he said, "I cancelled all that debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant, just as I had on you?" In anger, his master handed him over to the jailers to be tortured until he should pay back all he owed. This is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother or sister from your heart. In this is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Not yet, Graham, not yet. We're going to sing. We've changed the order slightly and that's confusing. Senior moments?
Yes.
We're allowed. We're going to sing, I believe we all know the tune, but the words are new. Is that right?
Yep.
Right. So please stand if you can.
When Jesus told his stories, he often was extreme. When teaching on forgiveness, he spoke of God's regime. A king had men who served him when settling each account. One servant owed 10 million, a grossly huge amount. The king was very angry. He said he must be sold. Together with his assets, his family young and old. This servant cried for mercy at such an awful threat. The king was moved to pity and so forgave the debt. The servant then decided to settle an account. A fellow servant owed him a very small amount. The debt of just 100 was small by any scale, but when he could not pay him, he threw the man in jail. When other servants heard this, they all were most distressed. They told the king the story. He would not let it rest. He called the wicked servant. His anger quickly grew. "You should have shown him mercy as I have shown to you." This question of forgiveness for
say, at this point I will now stand up for Jesus. Is that right? We'll get to the passage in a second. Bit chunky, isn't it? Yeah. All right. And if anyone who knows my story of recent times, kind of the last 4 or 5 weeks. Am I on? A bit hard for me to tell from here.
You're on, but it's not coming through.
Am I? All right. Oh, you know why? Because I don't have the.
Oh, that might.
You want to use that? You want me to turn that on?
Use elected. Yeah, use that.
Right. Thank you. Sorry. There we go. This time for sure. This time for sure. All right. So if you know my story at all the last 4 or 5 weeks, I have a friend of me. I cycle a fair bit, about 4 or 5 times each week. I'll cycle from home to here, and the infamous Woonona magpie has me in its sights. And I've tried all kinds of ways with this bird over the last 3 seasons. And when I was living here before and cycling, the bird knew me then and would swoop me back then. So it's remembered me pretty well. And the first time, of course, it comes as a surprise. And this time I felt quite early. It swooped me near about 2 weeks or a week before the end of August. And I felt this bang on the back of my helmet. And I kind of automatically knew what it was, but it scared the life out of me. And in fact, you know, like I've seen people in tears from this magpie. If you don't know what I'm talking, if you don't know the extent of it, it bangs you on the helmet. Anyway, so I had this plan. I've been trying to. Yeah, I know. Thank you, Penny. I probably should get those. And people tell me, but I'm too vain to look like I've given in to get the plastic. You know, I'm too vain. I'm just too vain. I don't look like one of those people who are a softie, have given in. You know. Call me stubborn, whatever you want to call me. Anyway, so I had this plan. One time, Gail and I sometimes, if the wind's coming from the south, we'll catch the train to Wollongong and come through. So I had this plan a couple of weeks ago where I said to Gail, how about we stick together? Because Gail's been able to go through all the time without it bothering her. It wants me, it doesn't touch Gail. So we were coming from the south and cycling through, and next thing I felt was this bang on my helmet. And my immediate response was to turn around to Gail to see what was getting. And she told me she was going to come through really close to me to make it look like 2 on 1, but she was 20 metres behind, right, and left me to myself. So I was quite annoyed about this, all right, the next time. So the next time we went through, I said to Gail very clearly, stick on my tail, stay right with me. That's the only way. It won't try and attack both of us together. It'll just, it'll leave us alone. So this time round, she sticks right on my tail. We go through, you know what happened? It attacked Gail. You can half imagine the looks that I got on the other side. Now, let me say, Gail is smarter than me. And I know that some people will think that's quite a low bar anyway. But Gail is smarter than me, and so she started. That was her last time through. That's right, isn't it? That should have been your last time through there. So she will go around the park. She's found another way. I'm stubborn. I am obstinate. I won't let the magpie win. No way in my life is that magpie going to beat me. So I have tried to find ways. I go down, and I have managed to do this okay of recent, coming from the north. I'll go around the beach side of the surf club, because it's in one of the pine trees right at the surf club there at Woonona. And I think I can sneak on through, get off my bike, take my helmet off, and then I've only got to walk a little bit more, and then I'm right. This morning, it was on the top of a house back up the street. I didn't even see it coming. All I heard was the bang, right? So here's my point, and it's a bit, and I know it may not carry over very easily, but here's my point, all right? When it comes to that magpie, really the smart part of me that doesn't want to be attacked would find another way to go about it, wouldn't it? Yeah, I would find another way, because it doesn't work to go through. To go close to that magpie doesn't work. That bird is smarter than me. It's stealth. Like I tell you, it knows shadows. You can't keep looking for a shadow to be coming. It knows how to come at you, no matter which direction the sun is. It knows, all right. And I've tried everything. I've tried talking to it. I've tried feeding it. I've tried everything, and And I've tried throwing my water bottle at it. Nothing works. But I'm choosing not to change. And the thing is about it, a bit like unforgiveness, I've dragged somebody else into my problem because I failed to address it. And I have to find, if I'm being smart, I need to find another way to deal with it. I just have to. If I want to avoid being attacked and I want to actually not spend half of my rest of my trip sort of heartbeat up, stressed, blah, 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 you know, I have to find another way. I'm choosing not to. And many of us are like that when it comes to unforgiveness or to forgiveness. Many of us are like that, and we carry unforgiving hearts because we think we're owed it. We think we have a right to it. We don't want to let the other person off the hook. That wouldn't be right. That wouldn't be honouring what went wrong. So I'm going to stick to it. So my homily this morning is if that's where you are, you've probably been there for 70 years, or 50 years, or 30 years, or 40 years, and there's nothing I'm going to say that's probably going to help you. My homily this morning is for those of you who are looking for another way. If forgiveness is an issue for you. Today's passage is actually about what I would call active unforgiveness. It's that way of forgiveness that doesn't forget and will act to make sure the other person knows. It's enacted. It's unforgiveness enacted. It's not passive. It doesn't just sit. That's another form of unforgiveness. You know that one? And we talked a bit about this last week in a different context. But that part of you that sits and stews and drinks the poison and expects the other person to die. But it's this enacted, it's this actively requiring an obligation of the other person. It's moving to force the other person to see the problem. Forcing them to make right, make good, to make reparation, to make sure they understand that that is what you are owed. In some ways, it's about retribution almost. I'm going to transfer my anger and frustration to you. You will carry it, not me. The thing is whether your unforgiveness is an active one or whether it's a passive one where you're the one who just sits and stews and schemes, and rather than passing on blessings, you pass on curses in your own heart. The thing is that your bitterness, your anger, your resentment, your unforgiveness are ugly. And they are seen. You can't hide it. It oozes out. It's like trying to hold it in a sieve. Example at point. In the reading this morning, when we read about the king who forgives the debt, the servant looks ugly, don't they? When they go to a fellow servant and require payment. The servant reads as a very ugly kind of character, don't they? Yes? Why do they read as ugly? Because of their hypocrisy, probably, would be my answer. You might have a different answer, but it's their hypocrisy. It's their pleading for mercy and forgiveness and receiving it, but then actively enacting an unforgiveness on another person in exactly the same manner that it could have been enacted on them. Another way to view it is it's almost like we're expecting evil to eradicate evil. Now that goes on in our world on so many different levels. where people live with this expectation that evil will eradicate evil. If we've got bigger guns than our opposition, we'll find peace. If I've got all this money in the world, then I can do good things for God. It comes out in all kinds of ways where we expect evil to eradicate evil. And if there's something we haven't learned over the last 2,000 years or 6,000 years of kind of civilization, then that's one of the things we haven't learned, definitely. Because the thing is that unforgiveness has this nature about it that is a weight. I'm going to ask you to finish this line for me, or to finish this phrase for me, in your head. You'll recognise it. Forgive us our blank, as we forgive those who... Now, okay, give me some of your thoughts. How did you finish it, Ron? Forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us, right? Okay, anybody else got a different way? Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Yep. Debt. That's actually the closest you get in the Greek, is debt. So that's why in the parable, debt and forgiveness are tied up together here. It's something we kind of miss because we turn the Lord's Prayer into being about sin. And then we've, in our time, have turned that into all of our wrongdoing. Or our trespassing, our encroaching onto other people. But the prayer is actually about forgiveness. And what it's telling us is if we are not prepared, forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Can you see what's going on in that line of the prayer? If we are not prepared, to make forgiveness a rhythm of our life, then we are actually creating debt. And the person that it's owed to, if you like, is God. In other words, God's saying to us, if you cross one of my children, or if you're going to be unforgiving to one of my children, then I'm holding that as debt against you. Now, I don't really necessarily like that way that God's portrayed very closely, but there is some truth in that, I think. It's a reality that we need to grasp. Is that forgiveness is meant to be a very, very innate part of our being, a practice, a rhythm of our lives that we learn and we practice daily, almost by the hour, almost by the minute. It's meant to be our go-to, one of our go-to foundational values, as far as I can read from the prayer, is to be prepared to be forgiving. Because otherwise you are carrying debt. And when you think you're passing that debt on to somebody else by being unforgiving, you're actually creating debt with God. Now, the other thing we know about God, thankfully, is that God is merciful, compassionate, loving, just, and forgiving. And God looks on us when we have chosen the lesser, perishing, corrupted way of being spiritual beings, of being spiritual humans. When we've chosen the lesser way, when we've chosen to cling to unforgiveness, but then when we turn and say, you know what, God, I'm tired of this debt. I'm tired of trying to pass this on to somebody else. Can we sort this out? God's immediate instinct with us is to forgive, to wipe it. So I come back to my question initially, which is, do you want to be free of this debt? Do you want to be free of this burden, of this ugliness, this lesser way of being, this perishing form of life, the corrupted way of life? It's like, because I think the other way to view it is to, rather than see ourselves trying to create debt, pass on debt to others, I think the fuller, richer, more godly way of dealing with this is to try and pass on what we know to be the forgiving nature of God, which is known in God's mercy and love and compassion. And rather than seeing our actions as being actively enacting our unforgiveness and seeking retribution, if we see ourselves as paying forward the mercy and the love and the kindness and the grace of God. Now, I get that's really hard. Because there are people in our lives who have wronged us, and sometimes wronged us quite badly, and sometimes wronged us intentionally, or recklessly, or carelessly. I get it. Because I don't think there'd be one person in this room who does not feel like they've been wronged quite badly at some time in their life. Yeah? In some way, shape or form. I know people sometimes like practical. I'm not going to call it advice because it's not advice. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I feel a bit more this is like fishing. I'm just throwing out some burley, all right? And if you want to eat it, you can. And if you choose not to, swim another way. Things that have helped me with unforgiveness are these. Firstly, a recognition that I don't know the motives of the other person. To assume I know what the other person's thinking, feeling, doing, and why they're doing something they're doing or have done in the past actually is a lesser way. So the coupling of that is what I would call truth-seeking, which only happens when you meet. I just want to stop for a moment and make the same proviso that I made last week. That there are some circumstances in life where I don't want to throw you back into a bad relationship. I'm not trying to tell you to do that. I'm not trying to throw you back into an abusive situation. And if there's someone who has used power over you or done something really, really bad, and you know it's either intentional or it's been totally reckless, then I'm not suggesting. I'm trying to go see a psychologist, talk to a counsellor, talk to someone who can walk with you much more gently than I get to do in these 20 minutes. And can equip you to be more resilient. But I'm talking about those kind of those interactions in life that we probably should be able to deal with. So, firstly, don't assume you know the motives of the other person. So in other words, I would call that a kind of grace. Let them be different rather than assume that they think how you do. The second one is truth-seeking. Meet. If you're able, meet. The third thing I'd say is to be a bit retrospect. And hear this however you will. But turn to God and see and marinate, if you like, in the justice, the mercy, the grace, the compassion, the forgiveness that has been extended to you. Spend some time in that space. Pray would be my fourth one. Pray for compassion. If you still can't get there, pray for compassion. Pray for kindness. Pray for freedom, to be freed of this debt, of this burden that you're carrying. Pray for life. A prayer that I've kind of found helpful, which in some ways goes against everything I'm saying right now, but I'm often taken by the words of Laban to Jacob. So Jacob's been screwing Laban over. You can go and read this in Genesis chapter, there's a few chapters in Genesis around 25 to whatever, where Jacob's gone off to his parents' homeland to find a wife. And he has to end up spending 12 years there. He gets diddled by Laban, his eventual wife's father. But there's this little verse where Laban, in Jacob getting his own back and messing Laban over, Laban eventually sets him free to go home. But he says these words, and you know what? I've seen couples wearing them it's called the Mizpah coin, and they wear them around their neck, and they wear a half each, right? And they wear it in this kind of really devoted, loving kind of way. And it says this: it says, "May the Lord watch between me and thee until we next meet." Lovely. It's a lovely kind of way to look about your partner, you know, like, may the Lord fill that gap between us. Well, you know what it means? It's Laban saying to Jacob, I don't trust you. I don't trust you. And whilst I can't keep an eye on you, God does. God knows the mess you're creating. And I'm actually, I'd see it this way, I'm choosing to step out of the mess that you create. That's one of my ways of finding forgiveness, is I'm choosing to step out of the mess that you create. And I've used this phrase before. In psychology, it's called radical acceptance, but I would call it kind of gracious unforgetfulness. In other words, you did that to me once, okay. You did it to me twice, okay, well now I'm aware. The third time you don't get to do this anymore. And it's not revenge. It's not anger. It's not bitterness. It's not retaliation. It's resilience. That says, I will survive this and I will do it a different way than being under your trouble causing. I'm stepping out from under it. Go and buy yourself a Mizpah coin and give half of it to someone you're having troubles with, eh? I want to come back. I don't know if any of that's been helpful for you. There might be something you've caught that might be of some use somewhere in there. But I want to finish at a point that I made a second ago, and that is this. Is when we view forgiveness, when we view unforgiveness as carrying a debt, when we view unforgivingness, and we understand that's sometimes part of our nature, we carry this unforgivingness about us It's an active verb. We live it out. We are actively unforgiving. It's ugly. And it's not life. It's death. In the Christian form of what we understand death to be in life. But when we choose, when we want to end that, and when we say, I'm actually going to try and make forgivingness a part of my nature, a part of who I am, a core of who I am, we are actually exonerating debt. And if I understand the scriptures at all, it's not so much, it actually exonerates two people. It allows the other person to be who they... don't get me wrong, I understand people come at different angles. Some people want forgiveness, some people don't. But for those that are seeking forgiveness, it exonerates two people. For those that don't care about you and you're practicing gracious unforgetfulness, then it's exonerating you of a debt that you're carrying. And it leads to freedom. Because often it's us who are the captive when we choose unforgivingness. So friends, if I've learnt much from today's passage, it's this, is to rather than holding on to that kind of nature within us, the invitation today is to pay forward the forgiving nature of God. Pay that forward to others. That's what exonerates our debt. That's what wipes out our debt. That's when we can start to pray the Lord's Prayer with some confidence. Forgive us our debts as we forgive those who are indebted to us. We can be confident of God's good favour for us. Let's be prepared to pay forward the love, the mercy, the grace of God. As God continues to call us into this other way of being. This is the other way of being. This is my pathway around the magpie. For us, it's the pathway to life. Amen. As I say every time,